The Basic Education Department estimates that between 150,000 and 700,000 children have dropped out of schools. This is due to COVID-19 disruptions. Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga has also announced that matric exam results will no longer be published on public platforms. It's due to concerns over the Protection of Personal Information Act. For more on this, we're joined by various guests, including Kabelo Ntekiso, who is with the Progressive Student Movement. He's the president there, and of course, education expert Olani Majola. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Mr. Majola, let me perhaps begin with you. The impression that we have been given by the Education Department is that this is the best that we can do under the circumstances. There's been a big push from parents and civil society groups for there to be a return to full capacity learning at schools. The department, and we've just heard the parliamentarian, the chair of the education portfolio in Parliament, saying that that is simply impractical. Is that really the case?
Thank you, Kathy. The Department of Education, as far as I'm concerned, I think they need to do a rethink in terms of the curriculum, in terms of its delivery. COVID-19 has presented what I call, I regard COVID-19 as the disruptor, as the catalyst. It has caught the Education Department unawares. And what they need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is to review their curriculum offering, because quite clearly we are flogging a dead horse here. Every year we come together, we discuss the very same thing all over, because the curriculum design in South Africa was never created with the content of the curriculum. It was designed without the consideration for digital intervention. And COVID-19 prevented that, brought that reality up front, where online resources and curriculum are becoming a reality, which government was never prepared for. So I think we need to advise the Department of Education to really take a hard and strong look at the curriculum offering, because at the moment there is a pass or fail kind of approach towards curriculum, instead of having a continuous assessment formative style of curriculum, which in my view will lead towards education for life. Right now we are content-based. We are not focused on the life skills, which I think the world is actually asking of all the education systems in the world.
Does that mean that by virtue of where we are and the design of the curriculum, because you're effectively saying that the two are incompatible, the need to rotate and have online learning versus this curriculum that is quite rigid, are you saying that learners are automatically being disadvantaged by the state of affairs as it is?
No, absolutely. South Africa being what it is, where we come from, all the structural inefficiencies that the majority of people in this country are still experiencing, this sort of thing. When COVID-19 happened, it was quite clear that those who have and can afford, they will run smoothly with whatever challenges that were brought to them. And those that who are still struggling, they would struggle even more, because right now, the way I'm looking at the matric results and suddenly them disappearing into a private space is that there are knowledge gaps which currently exist. Those that can plug into digital material, digital resources, they did. And those that couldn't, then obviously could not. Data has now become the new gold. If you have access to data, then you are likely to have access to curriculum. So affordability now determines access. That is where it becomes critical.
Kabelo, let me come to you. As somebody who represents a student movement, have you been exploring different ideas on how we can continue adhering to the COVID-19 protocols without necessarily jeopardizing what is the learning process of millions of learners in this country?
No, thanks, Katie. Good evening and compliments of the new season to you and the Newzroom Afrika team. Look, we have said as progressive student movement long time ago that COVID-19 has somehow possessed an opportunity for the Department of Basic Education to review its curriculum and also its system. Because one of the fundamental issues that we have realized is that COVID-19 has exposed some of the weaknesses in our education system. One being, well, lack of infrastructure, which is the one that brings us to this point, because we cannot go back to school on full capacity because we don't have enough infrastructure to cover all learners. But again, we don't have even sufficient, like Ntate Majola is saying, we don't have what you can call digital education space, where we can say our learners can migrate to a digital learning instead of physical learning. We don't have such, particularly in rural communities and in township schools, because of the disparities of apartheid that have not been redressed up to this point. So that is one of the fundamental issues that we need to look on. But then we also need to come up with amicable solution as stakeholders so that we can go to the basic education and propose. One of the things can be a rotational attendance, rotational time attendance. Well, having some of the learners attending in the morning and others attending afternoon classes. I think that can help. But at this point, I think, Katie, from our side as progressive student movement, we so believe that it's high time that the basic education open up for all learners to go back to school and come up with amicable solution like we proposed to them last year, that they should open for all learners to go to school. Because at this point, the rotational attendance really is not working for our learners. It's not bearing any fruits, and it's not going to bear any fruits also for if we want to verge for an economical development. We will fall behind because of the current rotational system is not bearing any fruits.
Let me bring into this conversation Matakanye, who is with the National Association of School Governing Bodies. Good evening to you, sir, and thank you so much for being available for this conversation. The point has been made. It seems that across the board, there's great difficulty that this rotational system has presented. As school governing bodies, what are the alternatives that we could be having to the current situation?
Thank you very much, Casey, and your listeners' compliments. You will remember, Casey, that we battled. We really battled for these past 2 years with the future of our children. In some instances, people were calling for the closure of schools, if you remember. Then we battled, but until we kept the system moving. Although our children missed a lot. There is a lot of gaps as from 2020, 2021. Now, in 2021, we campaigned that teachers must be vaccinated. And you remember, Casey, that the department listened to the Department of Health, then supported us, then they vaccinated the majority of teachers. But another campaign was that now children who are in higher grades, then they must also vaccinate. And I think we are still in that process of vaccinating. And what were the reasons of doing all these campaigns? The reasons of doing all these campaigns was to say, we want our children to go back to normality, so that now they must be taught from Monday to Friday. They must write full-fledged curriculum, because the curriculum has been cut. And once this curriculum has been cut, I think there's a lot of gap in terms of knowledge, in terms of values, in terms of attitude, in terms of skills. So we hope this year all these things we shall have done with them, and our children go back to normal, so that really we don't want to see these 2 past years where we were nearly our children being called the lost generation. We don't want to see that anymore in our schools, where our children are going to be referred as lost generation, So we think this year, because we have taken those measures into place, then this year is going to be normal school.
Mr. Matakane, listening to the Basic Education Minister earlier on in the day, it seems clear that the department feels that they have tried the best they could under the circumstances, and infrastructure, resource constraints simply do not allow an alternative solution. Do you think that that is truly the case?
It is true. It's true the case. We have been battling with the Department of Basic Education, say, build more schools, manage and maintain the schools that were built by the apartheid government. And you know that, and that's one of the reasons why our children are leaving township schools, our children are leaving the rural, the deep rural, the working class schools, and going to the so-called town schools, So it's due to the fact that now those schools were not really built for the education of our children, were built for something else, They are not habitable. And that's why we're fighting with the department and say, make better schools. You are a democratic government. Make better schools for this year. So they have been battling all this year, true, that they've been battling up to now. And when you look at 2020, 2021, people who suffered a lot are those schools in the township, those schools in the rural, the deep rural, those schools of the working class. They've been doing this rotation. And we proposed at one stage that now there must be platooning. And there was no platooning. Our children were going to school once a week, one day in a week. Just imagine when you teach grade R or grade 1, this child goes to school once a week. You are just playing. I mean, you are doing nothing, because by next week when he comes back to school, or when she comes back to school, she has forgotten what you have taught her last year. So it is true that we have got a problem. But we are saying, as much as we have got this problem, let's go to that very same system, where then our children will have to go to school Monday to Friday. We have to, but there's not any alternative. Alternative is what other people were saying: close down the schools. Then after the pandemic, then that. I mean, when does the pandemic going to come to an end? Nobody knows.
Mr. Matakane, we'll leave it there with you for tonight. Kabelo, let me just come back to you. So you talked about solutions that need to be taken to the Basic Education Department. Have you tried to do that as the Progressive Student Movement?
Look, Kathy, we have tried to get in touch with the Department of Basic Education. We have had several meetings with them. We've had several meetings via Zoom with them. We have made proposals. I remember the last meeting that we had. We also had a meeting with the MEC of Education in the Western Cape, Mrs. Debbie Staffa. So we've been trying to interact from national to both provincial to come up with alternative way to see as to what can be done so that our learners can go back to school. But then, as much as we are also treating this matter, we need to also make it known that COVID-19 is not the only pandemic that our learners are facing in various schools. We also have the issue of online application, which has left a lot of our learners outside the system. We have thousands of learners all across the country who are rejected by the system, in the dark about their future, whether they are going to be in school this year or what, because of the online application system has been dysfunctional. Also, a latter challenge has been the challenge of schools charging compulsory application fees, which we have been battling with all across the country. So these issues, we have been trying to deal with them blanketly so that we don't leave some of them outside. We need to deal with them collectively. So we have been proposing solutions, and we'll keep on proposing solutions up until our learners go back to school fully. I don't believe, like Tate Matakane has been saying, I don't believe the issue of COVID-19 vaccine can be the only solution to have our learners going back to school. Remember, COVID-19 vaccination education is not a compulsory thing. So we need to treat things collectively, not to treat others outside in the cold, but treat them collectively so that our learners can go back to school in 2022.
Mr. Majola, let me end it off with you. What is the cost of not being able to do more for this generation of learners that is going through high school? So effectively, if somebody started in grade 8 at the onset of this pandemic, they would now be moving to grade 10. That's almost halfway through the entire secondary school career.
This thing is about political will and desire for change and innovation, because the one who's bearing the brunt here is the learner, who obviously, I read some report from University of Stellenbosch where they were saying when children finish matric, they still need more years in order to be at the level of tertiary. So unless government really reconsiders its curriculum offering, the results are going to be the same. We're going to be here next year. We're going to be discussing exactly the same problems up until somebody at a higher level who's got the competency, who's got the power to change the system and actually changes it. Because COVID-19 was an indicator of what could be. Because right now we keep flogging a dead horse all the time and expecting a different result every time we flog the horse. We just need to do something different. Open room for digital content to be accessed. You know, in the past we used to have radio as a form of curriculum delivery. You know, television, cell phone, computer, iPad, all those things are there. They are available. What we need is a connector between those online digital resources and actually us making a move towards change.
Let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you to all of my guests for being part of this conversation.